If you're balling on a budget but you want the most bang for your buck from a project car, then a purchase from Salvage Auction just might be for you. The discounts can be significant, the deals can be great, but the danger is real, which is why today we're taking a look at the best of what Philadelphia Insurance Auto Auction has to offer. This is a car that I haven't had too much opportunity to look at in person, much less wrecked at the Salvage Auction in a price range that I might be able to afford. The new Nissan Z is a car that got a lot of publicity when it first came out, and I think that Nissan made some good moves when they updated this Z chassis. As we move around to the shadows here, we can see why it's here. Some damage down the passenger side. The quarter panel has a heavy amount of damage, and the wheel suspension definitely has something going on in there as well. The angle on it is not appropriate. It doesn't look like the wheel itself took a direct impact, but something in the suspension is shifted around or most likely broken. Kind of hilariously, the bumper itself looks to have survived besides just some broken tabs, but the challenge of this repair would be this quarter panel area with the gas filler. Even though the damage is at the back on the quarter panel, you can see a heavy crease all the way up by the door jamb. The door gap itself isn't as bad as I guess it could be, though it's much wider at the top than it is on the bottom now that I'm looking at it more. The side skirt survived. Looks like the door has no damage whatsoever. The hatch itself looks to be in pretty good shape. There's some additional damage here at the front, but with these cars being so new and still so valuable, this is definitely a fixer project. Looks like you need a fender, a headlight. The bumper itself has a heavy crease and damage in it. I don't think that this one can be reused, although it looks like the front grille survived really with no issues there. There is an opening. I don't know if maybe that's for a tow hook or something. And it looks like maybe a cooler back there is moved around. So at a minimum, you need a few body panels, definitely some brackets, maybe some minor framework. Hopefully on these cars it bolts on, otherwise you're drilling a couple spot welds. Under the hood, though, we see what I think was the best move for Nissan to do, to put the VR30 engine into this. Comes factory with twin turbos. Previously, this engine was used in, I believe, the Q50 and Q60 Red Sports, as well as maybe some other Infinities. And to give the Nissan community a twin turbo engine from the factory, I think was a very, very smart move, especially because cars like the Civic come turbo from the factory now as well. This car, though, very, very dirty. Looks to be completely stock and in good condition. There is a run video for it on IAA's website, so we will get a chance to start this up here in a little bit. There doesn't appear to be any damage to the driver headlight over here, and aside from the bumper being shifted around a little bit where it mounts to the fender, the driver's side of the car looks to be as it should from the factory. An appropriate quarter panel to door jamb gap here on the driver's side, and let's see on the inside. Oh, blue interior. Wow. The interior on this is absolutely gorgeous on the white. You have a combination of suede and leather as well as just the black vinyl. Some carbon fiber touches here, which I'm not sure if that's from the factory or if that's something aftermarket already available for these cars. Oof. The passenger door doesn't open up the easiest, and we've already touched on the alignment issues over there, and we can see there's a blown bag here on the seats. One thing that kind of drives me absolutely crazy is that these seats look to be exactly the same to me as the previous generation Zs. I understand from a production side of things why it would be cost effective to do that, but I don't know how you reintroduce a car and expect people to get excited about it when you're borrowing components from a car that's been around for a decade already. Now the dash has typical Z styling with the gauges up front and center, but it's also very modernized. I really like the design that they went ahead with here. The blue touches on the dash really drive it home for me. I love the interior design. They did just enough on this, kept the carpet and the majority of the interior black with a good accent color that really stands out. Being my first time sitting in one of these cars, I didn't realize that they have a turbo speed gauge as well as a boost gauge. I love the boost gauge up there nice and visible, but turbo speed, I don't know that anybody knows off the top of their head how fast their turbo should be spinning. This thing is low on fuel, but it fired right up, only a little over 1,000 miles, although I think it's a little bit redundant to have a digital boost gauge when you have just an old school analog one up there, again, with the turbo speed already. You got engine oil temperature, water temp, diff oil, transmission oil temp, but Again, duplicate boost gauges and a turbo speed gauge, and you don't just have a basic oil pressure gauge on here. That just doesn't seem right to me. Get that turbo spinning just a little bit. This car sounds absolutely great. We're not going to leave it running too long just because we never know what hidden damage is up there. But again, I love this car. These Zs for me, when they were just 6-cylinder naturally aspirated, I could never really wrap my head around the price range that they seem to sell within. These new ones being twin turbo, I can get behind the hype just a little bit more. With that being said though, this car is going to fetch some money when it runs at auction. The ones that I've watched that are very clearly parts cars have gone well into the high teens. I think this car being so low mileage and such a good spec, it's going to fetch well into the 20s, maybe even up towards $25,000. Now this Z isn't up for auction yet, so we're not going to get to see it sell in this video, but the next car that we're looking at is going to cross the auction block, and it might even be one that we get a chance to buy. Now whether you're a fan or not, it's hard to argue that the Mustang isn't one of the most iconic American sports cars, and up until recently, the Shelby GT500 has always been the flagship of that line. Now it hurts to see one in this condition, but it also presents an awesome opportunity, and this one appears to be nicely modded. Now I'm going to start by saying that even though the damage is very isolated, to me this is 100% a parts car. Whenever you get damage into the door jamb and A-pillar areas, this is a very, very complicated repair, and even though these cars have a almost cult-like following and people are willing to pay good money for them at salvage auction, this one doesn't look like a fixer for me. The damage to the frame extends all the way up to the front of the car, and this just looks like it's a little bit too far gone. Now it's easy to see all of that frame damage because the fender was conveniently removed in the accident. On top of that, even though it's minimal damage to the hood, it definitely will need to be replaced. The front bumper is a full replacement. The windshield is going to have to be replaced. This driver door as well. So you're looking at a large number of body panels that would need to be sourced, as well as tackling that difficult frame repair. And if you need any more convincing, there's almost certainly significant suspension damage behind this completely destroyed wheel, although it looks like the Brembo brake caliper might have survived. All right, what else needs to be replaced? It looks like the door panel made it, but you need a steering wheel airbag. Now that gets a little bit tricky because they have that Shelby snake logo on them. The seats I don't think are really anything special, but this one's definitely gonna have to either be repaired or replaced. As for the rest of the interior, this thing looks pretty clean inside. Now it does look like somebody did a very, very poor job of securing the wiring for the gauges, or they were in the beginning stages of removing said gauges, because those are definitely aftermarket AEM and autometer gauges up on the center of the dash. And it does look like I stand corrected. These GT500 seats, although the shape looks the same, they have a nice, awesome looking embossed snake in the backrest there. So if you can find an airbag, having it in an upholstery shop replace the panels that are damaged might be the route to go on this. Back end of the car, aside from a couple nicks, I think is in really good shape. I didn't see any damage when I initially walked around this car, and it also does have a nice aftermarket MagnaFlow exhaust, if you could see it past the shadow of my microphone. The other thing that I noticed was that it does have the Toyo R888Rs, which is why I think that this thing might be up on power a little bit. And when we pop the hood, we get a look at that beautiful 5.4 liter supercharged engine that was the stuff of dreams for Ford fans before the Coyote came along. As expected, we have some aftermarket modifications, intake, as well as I see some cooling here. It's always nice to see a catch can that tells me that someone took the time to make sure the engine's breathing healthy as they're trying to extract as much horsepower out of it as possible. Now, I'm not the most familiar with these cars, but this looks like an aftermarket pulley to me, and so does this. It looks very small, and we got the green Gates belt, which normally tells you that this thing has had some pulley work. It's a little bit too difficult to see all the way down to the bottom to see if there's a lower pulley, but I'm gonna guess that it's definitely not stock. I also see a VMP performance heat exchanger tucked behind the grille there, who I happen to know from experience makes some of the best parts available for any year supercharged Mustang. Now, this one is listed as running, so we're gonna hook up our anti-gravity jump pack, hop inside the interior, and see how this thing sounds. Now, a little bit of a rough start. That makes me really curious if this car is on pump gas. It does smell a lot like pump gas, but the way that that thing fired up made me think that it might be on E85. Everything in the engine bay looks and sounds great. Even at idle, you can hear that Eaton supercharger just humming along. Oh, it's hard to go wrong with a supercharged V8. So we've been through the damage. We confirmed that it runs. Really, the only question that remains is what it's going to sell for when it crosses the auction block. And I'm going to watch this auction from the comfort of my office and in my Flexispot ergonomic chair C7 Max. Easily the most comfortable chair that I've ever sat in, fully adjustable to suit anybody. I'm talking about lumbar support, head and neck support, adjustable armrest, and even a footrest. And apparently it brought us some good luck because we just won the Mustang for a pretty fair price. It is on reserve though, so we're gonna have to see if insurance is gonna accept that bid. While we're waiting, head on over to Flexispot's website and check out the C7 Max ergonomic chair. If you're looking for a more cost-effective option, check out the C7 chair, all the same comfort with less adjustability options. At checkout, be sure to use my promo code C730 for $30 off of your purchase, and be sure to check out the new C7 Morpher chair. Now, let's head back to the salvage auction and see what else we can find. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find somebody that says that a Lamborghini isn't high up on their list of dream cars. Now, the amount of people that can actually afford them is a completely different story. This one, it might be in the majority of the average Joe's price range, but there is a reason for that, and yeah, it's pretty bad. Now, it's a little hard to tell on this one exactly where the fire started, but hopefully as we dive a little bit deeper into this, we'll be able to pinpoint where it began. The fact that the front of the car mostly survived makes me think that it started all the way in the back and then moved to the interior of the car. I think if it started in the interior, it would have kind of spread equally in both directions, and obviously the majority of the rear end is just completely melted away. It is kind of interesting to see that the entire middle of the rear bumper remained where the exhaust section is. Because of the OEM heat shields, the exhaust that's underneath it might have survived. Although when I dive underneath of it, you can see this one's been sitting here for so long out in the elements, and it's actually started to develop some surface rust on the exhaust. I would have thought a car like this would have come with a titanium exhaust from the factory, but I guess I could be wrong. The suspension design on this car in the engine bay is just absolutely awesome to see in front of the V12 engine, although normally we're used to seeing it in much better condition. And speaking of that engine, unfortunately, I think there's probably not a lot of hope that water didn't get into it at some point here as it's been sitting at the lot. A car that's damaged this badly, it's just so hard to be able to protect it from the elements, especially since this car has been on IAA's website for over a year now. Oftentimes when you get cars with this extensive of damage in this price bracket, there's heavy investigations into the cause of it, and because of that, they sit at the auction here for a very, very long time. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get into this car or start it or any of the fun stuff, but we can look at the construction on it. And the fact that you can see the exposed carbon fiber monocoque on this car is just so cool to see, even though it's so sad to see. From what we can see of the seats, there's just absolutely nothing left, and it's just melted carbon fiber strands absolutely everywhere. So this one is very clearly a parts car, which is why I have maybe a small amount of hope for it. We're not into the Lamborghini parts market at all, but this one might just go cheap enough, and because it's relatively local, maybe it will pique our interest. So let's talk about where the money is on this car. I don't think at the back end that there's going to be anything usable in here besides just for cores. The engine, the transmission, I don't think I would trust them without having them gone through completely, but that doesn't mean that they don't have several $1,000s of value. The exhaust we already touched on, and even in its condition, it's probably still worth several $1,000s. And as we move around back here, the wheels, I don't think that there's really much value in them except for wall art. but it appears that it shielded the carbon ceramic brake rotor and the caliper itself from a lot of that heat. So you might get several $1,000s of usable components here. Even if the carbon ceramic itself shows some damage, just the hat that it bolts to on this car is probably worth $1,000. At the front here, it looks like the fenders and the hood are both aluminum construction, and I don't think that the fire really did much damage here, except from the actual heat itself. It looks like all of this is just from the aluminum just warping and distorting. Then we get all the way to the front end with the front bumper. Again, I'm not a Lamborghini person, but I have to imagine that this front bumper, even though it's got a little bit of damage, both front, I'm assuming that that can be probably refiberglassed. It looks like this is actually a plastic as opposed to a carbon fiber or something like that. But I have to imagine that this front bumper, even in this condition, complete with the grills, has to easily be $10,000. Easily. Besides some tape marks, each one of the headlights appears to be in good shape. Each one of these has to be an easy $5,000. The front wheels do appear to be in usable condition. I have to imagine that each one of them has to be worth at least $1,000. And then there's what's behind them. The giant carbon ceramic brake rotor and the caliper. I have to imagine each one of these front corners, $10,000. And then you have the hard parts like the suspension, like the steering rack, items that probably won't sell quickly at all from this car, but have to have hefty price tags, and they're not out there available besides directly from the dealership where you're going to pay full retail price. Even small items like the frunk trim that we can see underneath this jam shut hood. If you have one of these cars that's in a front end collision that is then being repaired, you need all of them. You're talking about hundreds and hundreds of dollars in small trim pieces and nuts and bolts. Now, I wasn't doing the math there as I went along, but it sounded like I named close to $40,000 in parts value with just what we could see on the surface here. So the fact that it's pre-bid to $20,000, you can start to wrap your head around the justification for that. Now, the real question is going to be what it ultimately sells for.
Now, as much as I want to be involved in this auction, right now is just not a good time for me to be thinking about spending $25,000 plus on an absolutely torched and very risky Lamborghini. Even though we just went through the numbers and you can wrap your head around it, or at least I can, the viewers out there still might not be able to understand this much money for this car. But from a parts perspective, the money is there, but it's still a risky choice. So we're going to go ahead and fast forward through this and get to the very end of the auction to see what it sells for.
Time extended. Sale pending.
I've rebuilt C5 Z06s, I've rebuilt C6 Z06s, but I haven't yet rebuilt a C7. And I have to say that the color combination on this one makes this a car that I would love to get my hands on. The damage might ultimately say otherwise, but even as a parts car, I would love to get my hands on this. I said earlier that the door jamb damage is complicated, and I normally don't like even entertaining cars that have that type of impact, but looking down at the side skirt, it almost looks like this might have been kind of more of a glancing blow as opposed to a direct impact like the GT500 was. Now, even though the window's down, I can't get inside of this car, and I can't reach either the door latch or the hood latch. So we're just gonna have to peek in from the outside, check out all the beautiful carbon fiber work on the dash and the awesome saddle color interior. I don't know exactly what they call this color, but this is so much better than your standard tan. There's insurance markings all the way to the back here, although a lot of what's on the rear end looks to be very, very minor, maybe even not caused from the accident, except for that little bit on the side. I'm gonna guess that was there previously. And as we keep moving back around to the passenger side, this side looks completely flawless, except for the lack of battery power and the unfortunate water incursion that has probably resulted because of that. The interior looks to be a fairly high spec, though it doesn't have the competition seats, doesn't have the carbon ceramic brakes, so it's definitely not a Z07 package car. There's some insurance markings on the front bumper, but you kind of already planned on replacing that because of the damage on the driver's side. There's a mark on the hood, but like that rear bumper mark, I think that was probably a rock chip from before the accident. But as far as what we can see of the damage, the headlight itself actually looks to be pretty well intact. It almost looks like it just moved around out of his mounts, which would be a massive, massive victory. Yeah, look at all the broken fiberglass from both the fender and also the tub. So you know you're going to get in there and at least replace that. The wheel is kind of tilted around at a interesting angle. I'm going to guess that there's some suspension damage under there, but really the big question with these Corvettes is the frame, because they're all one giant piece. I haven't found anything with this damage that's overly scary, and I absolutely love the color combination on this car. So if this thing went for a good price, I would love to get my hands on it and rebuild it. Now, this is a car that is high up on my dream daily driver list, although I definitely can't justify the price tag except if it goes super cheap at salvage auction. The entire driver's side of the car looks to be in great shape, but this passenger front corner has some serious issues. This impact is a little bit weird, honestly. It's kind of hard to tell exactly how it was hit and what it hit, but at least the damage is isolated here to this front corner. Looking past the completely destroyed tire, it looks like the frame rail in there is completely untouched, maybe even the front crash bar, unless the metal we're seeing right there is just clean sheared off. Obviously, you're going to need a front wheel. That's a given, but it looks like the brake caliper survived. The two-piece brake rotor in there looks to be in good shape. It's really kind of hard to see all the suspension components. I'm going to assume that this whole corner is going to need to be replaced, but I don't think there's any reason to think that all the mounts for them are where they should be. The transmission cooler, what I would assume to be the transmission cooler, normally they're on the passenger side, looks to be in mostly one piece, though there is a lot of residue, which makes me think that maybe it's got an end tank broken or something along those lines. Obviously, headlight and front bumper will need to be replaced, but the fact that more than half of the grills on this survived is definitely a big win. Kind of crazy because the hood itself doesn't appear to be damaged at all. Looking underneath, we get a good look at that shock tower, which again looks to be completely fine, and maybe like the newer Camaros, this appears to be that composite shock tower that GM's been using since somewhere around like the 2016 time frame. Ever since GM supercharged the Gen 2 CTS-V, there was no way that they were ever getting away from that for these V chassis. The LT4 engine has proven to be a worthy successor to the LSA. This one appears to have some modifications. I see an aftermarket pulley there. I would assume maybe a grip tech. Looking down, it has a really big crank pulley, but it looks to be stock. A Rotofab intake, and if you look past that, it might be hard to see, but there are definitely a set of headers. This one is listed as running, so we're definitely going to have to hear this car in a little bit, but we need to finish looking around it a little bit more before we get too excited. Oh wow, speaking of excited, I didn't know that the hoods on these cars are full carbon fiber. I knew it had that exposed carbon fiber vent that's right in the middle, but it looks like the entire bottom side, like the C6 ZR1s, they did the exposed carbon fiber, which is really an awesome touch. I thought the back end of this car was just dirty, but it does have some damage. There's some dents and dings on the trunk there, and the bumper is scraped up as well, which isn't really a big deal, but it is probably pretty costly. That might be able to be repaired, but the bumper damage is probably going to be a replacement. This might be an aftermarket exhaust. Again, I'm really excited to hear what this thing sounds like, but I'm curious how many of the airbags blew in the interior. And the answer is absolutely none of them. You can hear the dinging, which means that this thing retains some power. I do have the jump box, so obviously that won't be an issue, but whenever you have a salvage auction car that has good battery power, it usually means that it hasn't been sitting here that long. Oh, that sounds great. Almost 68,000 miles on this particular V. The interior appears to be in great shape, although I do think that this was a smoker's car. There's an odor to it, which is just a big negative in my book, but it could probably maybe be cleaned up. These seats appear to be the Recaro version. Definitely the Recaro version, as you can see that tag. Although I have to imagine a lot of people would consider the not all black interior a turnoff. I don't mind the two-tone, it just definitely needs to be cleaned up. The top half is all Alcantara, and GM actually did a lot of Alcantara in this interior. I know the seat backs are covered in it as well, and really it's a nice touch. This car has a great feel inside of it. This is one I'm definitely gonna have to keep an eye on. I've been wanting to do a rebuild on one of these, even if I'm only gonna be able to keep it and drive it for a little bit. I'd really like to experience a nice luxury, high horsepower daily driver like this at some point before I get too old. Being able to look at this one in person just makes me a lot more comfortable with the damage that we have going on. We'll ultimately have to see when it's going to go up for auction and how much it sells for. I'm learning more and more about these BMWs, but they are quickly growing on my list of cars that I want to rebuild. I've looked at a couple of these M3s at insurance auction, and I really would like to get my hands on one of them or an oddball like the Z3. Now this one is a little bit older. This is the F80 with the S55 drivetrain in it, where the brand new one has the S58. The B58 and the S58 have proven to be worthy successors in a long line of storied BMW drivetrains. Even if I don't like them a lot, it's hard to argue with the fact that they can make power out of these. The color on this car is absolutely fantastic. Every manufacturer kind of has a different name for it. It's like the Destroyer Gray Hellcat that I put the 2JZ engine into. I love the carbon fiber roof on this car, and inside, not the best color interior. The contrast is great. I would say that the exterior color is probably one of the best colors for this interior, but I just can't bring myself to get excited about a basically off-white interior. Lots of airbags blown on the inside. The driver's seatbelt is locked. Passenger side is good, and I always do love the M stripes on these. We need to take a better look outside though at the damage to figure out if this might be something that's ultimately in our wheelhouse. Obviously, if the wheel is tilted like that, it has a significant amount of suspension damage. You know there's a lot of body panels that are going to have to be replaced, and really the most unfortunate one of those is the front bumper. It's only a minor amount of damage there under the headlight, but the fact that it looks like all of the carbon fiber grills at the front of the car survived means that that might not be as costly as you would think. Bumper skins can be expensive, especially for a BMW, but the carbon fiber grills are more. Definitely going to need a headlight replacement along with this fender, but it does look like the hood survived. The door definitely has a little bit of damage. Both doors have a little bit of damage, but at least the damage to the quarter panel back here is very, very minor. Door jamb looks to be very, very good, and the door opens and shuts pretty easily. So I think this is kind of more cosmetic, even though it does look kind of rough the more I get close to it. Aside from some scratches, here at the back, everything looks to be in proper shape. It does have a nice carbon fiber lip kit on it, and it also does have a Valvetronic exhaust, which I'm going to assume if it's on this car that it's got more than titanium tips. The engine bay, though. Everything here looks to pretty well be in order. When you get over to the passenger side where the primary damage is, I don't even see anything wrong with this kind of upper frame rail here. This bracket here might have to be replaced, but it looks like that bolts on. So from what I can see, the whole shock tower, that whole area looks pretty good. From what I can see down to the frame rail, everything looks pretty straight. This repair looks to just be a lot of cosmetic pieces. Now, for whatever reason, this one is not listed as running on IAA's website. I went ahead and put power to it just from a curiosity standpoint, and it is not getting any power when I have my jump box hooked up. So maybe because of the airbag deployment, or maybe like a fusible link has completely cut power to the vehicle. So we can't hear this one run, but we can take a look at this beautifully colored F80 M3. Now, this older generation has a different drivetrain in it, but it shares a lot of the same styling cues. We see a lot of carbon fiber throughout with the lower lip, the trunk spoiler, as well as the roof. And these things, because they are the older generation, are starting to get very cheap, whether at salvage auction or not. Now, this one has a very lackluster all-black interior, despite the beautiful exterior color, which I'm not sure what this is, but it's a great shade, like combination of red and orange. The carbon fiber throughout gives you a little bit of contrast, but I would love to see a cool color in here, especially with this exterior color, like some Sakura orange inserts or something, would have gone a long way on this car. Now, one thing that just caught my eye is at the back here, the rear brakes are like that kind of crappy looking exposed floating caliper look, as opposed to the nice brake calipers like we have at the front. I thought that these had nice calipers on all four corners. I wonder if somebody's been in there and replaced them, or if I'm just misremembering. For the damage at the front, surprisingly, Most of the coolers survived besides the one on that side. For that reason, we're not going to attempt to start this, but it looks like all of the damage was above this frame wheel. The hood is wedged shut, so I can't really get a good look inside, but it looks like it was a pretty high impact, and the majority of what you're going to have to replace there is right around the headlight bucket area. Obviously a fender, obviously a hood, obviously a bumper. But when you get over to this side, it looks like the headlights survived, absolutely no problem. The fender looks good. The hood gap looks pretty good. So I think that the impact over there, even though it took out a lot, was relatively minor. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an easy fix or easy on your wallet. Some of these BMW prices are absolutely insane, and as we keep moving around, you can see little stuff like the mirror cover on there, which actually both sides, I'm gonna guess that wasn't from the accident. I'm gonna guess those were some nice carbon fiber ones that the previous owner went ahead and removed before it came here to the salvage auction. I do like this car, but if I'm gonna pull the trigger on one of these BMW rebuilds, it's gonna be one of the newer B58, S58 models, like the M3 that we looked at previously. But we've got more to move on to here at the salvage auction. You know, it's a pretty good salvage auction trip when one of the last cars that we look at is a mostly complete Evo 10. Aside from the front lip barely hanging on due to poor attachment, I assume, this car looks to be all in one shape. But taking a look at that front windshield, I think I know why it's here. This appears to be a flood car. One of the scariest cars to buy from auction because you just never know how far the water got into this. And yeah, the smell says this is a flood car. Gonna open this up and hopefully maybe let it air out for a minute so we can poke around in this interior. In the meantime, let's look under the hood. Okay. Wow, nicely modded under the hood here. Evos come with the front mount intercooler stock, but I'm gonna guess that that is an aftermarket one. It's hard to really get a look at it, but it looks thicker. From what I can see down there past the hood latch, it looks like a thicker core than the OEM one. We see a lot of AMS stuff. I like the touch of the purple tile blow-off valve, although it doesn't really tie in this particular engine bay, but you guys know that I love the purple accents in the engine bay. At the back, it looks like it's the factory exhaust manifold with the typical crack on it, so you're gonna definitely have to replace that. And looks like the factory turbo. So I'm gonna guess we're like full bolt-ons with a factory power plant. The engine bay overall is pretty clean. I haven't got a distinct water line, but you can tell that this thing definitely wasn't under a ton of water. It had to have gotten in the interior and into the carpet just because of the smell, but there's nothing on the side of the car or anywhere that I've found that gives me an indication of how high it actually got. Oh, actually, you know what? Now that I'm saying that, look at this line right here. It's dirty from there down, and from there up, it's relatively clean. Now, you do see some like extra rubber here in this area, but that's maybe the first line that I've seen, and that would make a lot of sense because when you close the door, that is just over where the weather shield in the interior would be, which makes sense why just the lower section would have gotten wet. I remember when the Evo 8s came out in 2003 and the Brembo brakes on them was just such a cool touch, but now so many cars come with Brembo brakes and BBS wheels. Most of the time, these flood cars, the salvage auction never attempts to start them. I'm relatively confident that this one might fire up, though I'm not going to be the guy to attempt to start it. I have kind of a strict rule that unless it's a running car on the salvage auction's website, I'm not going to attempt to start it. This car does have the cloth Recaro seats, which appear to be in really, really good shape. A lot of the times the driver bolster gets super torn up on them. And then just some basic modifications. Looks like we got the full assortment of AEM gauges on the A-pillar. Otherwise, it looks to be very stock and very clean. We used to do a lot of these cars as parts cars, and then once COVID hit, these were one of the chassis that went up significantly at salvage auction, and the parts value didn't follow just because they fare so poorly condition-wise. Everyone knows that these Mitsubishis are prone to rusting out, especially when they're in the Northeast, or I guess the entire northern half of the United States, which is where a lot of them are purchased because they're all-wheel drive. So it's really unfortunate because the people people that bought them and used them for exactly what they were designed for, those are the cars that are usually in the worst shape. This one looks to be a really, really nice car overall, but again, with the prices going up on these cars and them just not being able to be found in good condition, I have to imagine that this car will fetch well north of $10,000 at auction. The Philadelphia area certainly had a lot of good cars for us to look at here at Salvage Auction, and this is just a fraction of what's available on IAA.com. So if you're thinking that a salvage auction rebuild might be for you, get online, take a look at the inventory, and if you end up buying something, be sure to tag us in whatever you're working on.